Hello, GCHC students. It's Charlie, and welcome to Week 10 podcast. In this podcast, I'll be talking about the viral reproduction cycle. And as we know, viruses only replicate inside the host cell, and that's because viruses don't have a reproduction machinery for their own, but they can use the host cell reproduction machinery in order to reproduce themselves. Since viruses don't have ribosomes, as prokaryotes and eukaryotes do, they cannot replicate their DNA and proteins. So what they do is using the host cell ribosomes to make their own DNA and proteins. Viruses have two different life cycles that they can use in order to reproduce themselves. They can use either the lytic or the lysogenic cycle. In the lytic cycle, the virus first attaches itself to the host cell. Then, after attachment, they inject their genome or their DNA inside the host cell. Once inside the host cell, the viral DNA breaks down the host DNA. The virus then completely control the host cell. By using the host cell reproduction machinery, the viral DNA direct the production of the virus new parts. The new produced viral parts then assemble into a complete new virus particles, and after assembly, the new virus particles break the host cell membrane open, which cause the host cell to die and release themselves outside. These released viruses can then go and infect the nearby cells and repeat the cycle again and again and again. So the end of this cycle is always the cell death. The lysogenic cycle, however, is slightly different. Unlike the lytic cycle and the lysogenic cycle, the host cell don't die at the end. However, the virus is going to replicate its genome as long as the host cell is replicating itself. Okay, how this happens? In the lysogenic cycle, the virus first attaches itself to the host cell, then it injects its genome inside the host cell, just like what happened in the lytic cycle. But instead of breaking down the host DNA and taking over the host cell, the virus inserts its DNA into the host DNA. And in this case, the virus DNA is called provirus. So the question here is why the virus is doing that? And the answer is because every time the host cell replicates itself, it's also going to replicate the provirus or the virus DNA as well. This is the end of the lysogenic cycle, which results in no cell death. But at any time, the provirus or the virus DNA that attached to the host cell DNA can leave the host cell DNA and break it down and start the lytic cycle. So to recap, viruses have two different life cycles. So they can use the lytic cycle to reproduce themselves by breaking down the host DNA and then make new virus particles and then release themselves outside the cell, which cause the death of the host cell. Or they can use the other cycle, which is the lysogenic cycle. And in this case, the virus attaches its DNA to the host DNA, and then as long as the host's DNA is replicating itself, the viral DNA gonna replicate as well. And then at any time, the virus DNA gonna leave the host DNA and then break down the host DNA and go through the lytic cycle. So I hope that was helpful and see you in class.